You're standing at a railing high up, looking straight down. Nothing is wrong. You're not going to jump. You don't want to jump. And for half a second, a small voice says, jump anyway. That's not you losing your mind. It's one of the oldest safety systems in your body, misfiring in a very specific and very common way. Scientists gave it a real name only recently, the high place phenomenon. So, why does the safest part of your brain sound for one instant like the most dangerous? Let's start with what it isn't. It isn't a death wish. It isn't your subconscious trying to hurt you. For most of the 20th century, nobody studied this seriously because almost everyone who felt it assumed it meant something was wrong with them and stayed quiet about it. This instinct is old enough that scientists caught it decades before they ever had a name for what happens to adults on a balcony. In 1960, researchers at Cornell built something called the visual cliff, a solid glass table with a checkered pattern directly underneath one half, and the exact same checkered pattern dropped a few feet lower on the other, creating the illusion of a sudden ledge, even though the glass made the whole surface perfectly safe to cross. Human infants just old enough to crawl were placed in the middle and coaxed by their mothers to cross the deep side. Most refused outright, some crying at the edge of the glass, some patting it curiously with their hands, clearly able to feel that it was solid and still unwilling to put their weight on it. Kittens, puppies, chicks, and lambs tested the same way did the exact same thing on the very first attempt, with no training and no prior fall to learn from. Depth aversion wasn't taught to any of them, it was already running, in species that share almost nothing else in common, before experience had a chance to install it. A baby who can't talk yet and a lamb that's never seen a hill both know to stop at the glass edge. You, an adult with a mortgage and a driver's license, still feel the exact same thing at the railing of a hotel balcony. The instinct never got the memo that you grew up. It took until 2012 for anyone to study what that same instinct looks like once it's grown up alongside you. Researchers at Florida State University, led by Jennifer Hames, finally asked a large group of people a simple question. Have you ever stood somewhere high and felt an urge to jump even with zero desire to die? More than half said yes. Not people in crisis, ordinary people, on ordinary balconies, bridges, and canyon overlooks, the exact places you'd expect a healthy person to be paying the most attention to their own footing, not the least. Here's the part that flips the whole idea on its head. The people most likely to report this feeling weren't the ones with suicidal thoughts. They were the people with the highest anxiety sensitivity, the ones whose bodies react hardest and fastest to any signal of danger. The urge to jump wasn't a crack in their self preservation instinct, it was the loudest possible version of it. Here's the mechanism researchers landed on. The instant you approach an edge, a fast survival circuit fires a hard command: get back. Your body actually starts to obey it. A flinch, a shift in balance, a tightening in the legs. But your conscious mind arrives a fraction of a second late, and it's handed a strange report: a sudden urge, aimed at the edge, with no obvious reason attached. Stripped of context, your brain does what it always does with an unexplained impulse. It tries to name it, and the nearest available label standing at a height is jump. It isn't a wish, it's a mistranslation of your own alarm system, arriving one beat behind the alarm itself. Now, a skeptic might say this is just ordinary caution, dressed up with a fancy name. Of course, you're careful near a ledge. Anyone would be. That's fair, as far as it goes. But caution doesn't explain the specific unwanted urge itself, the actual pull toward the edge that so many people report and so many kept secret for decades out of fear it meant something dark. Careful people avoid edges. This is different. It's the edge seeming to call you for one half second, precisely because your alarm system is working exactly as designed. Go back far enough, and the shape of this reflex makes sense. Height was one of the plainest, most survivable dangers our ancestors ever faced. No ambush, no disease, no argument about who saw the deer first, just gravity, waiting to be ignored exactly once. An ancestor who felt nothing at a cliff's edge didn't get a second chance to learn caution. An ancestor whose whole body flinched and braced at the first hint of a drop off did, and lived long enough to pass that flinch on. The urge you feel today isn't a leftover glitch from a species that used to be careless. It's the opposite. It's proof that the most anxious, most protective wiring in your ancestors was the wiring that won generation after generation long before anyone was there to name it. In 1943, the philosopher Jean Paul Sartre wrote about this same feeling and called it vertigo. Not the fear of falling, he said, but the unsettling awareness that nothing except your own choice is stopping you from stepping forward. He didn't have Hames's data. He just stood at enough edges to notice the same things science eventually measured. So the next time you're up high and that quiet, unwanted voice shows up for exactly 1 second, that's not a hidden wish surfacing. That's a several 100,000-year-old alarm doing its job so forcefully that the warning itself briefly outruns the explanation attached to it. None of this was ever a decision you made. Your body was already pulling you back before your mind had a name for why. And it's running that same ancient calculation every single time you get close to an edge. Whether you notice it or not, whether you're 12 stories up or standing on a step stool, you already know is sturdy. And if a 500,000-year-old alarm can make your own brain sound like a stranger for 1/2 second, wait until you see what it does to you in a room full of people, all lying to your face at once.